I wasn't supposed to be on that flight. My ticket to Lisbon had been booked on impulse, a one-way escape route from a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. The truth is, I wasn't running from anything specific. At least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I knew better. Something had been unraveling inside me for months. The job I used to love felt like a cage. My apartment, once a sanctuary, had become a showroom of someone else's version of me. And Lucas? Well, the silence between us was starting to feel louder than any fight we'd ever had. I stared out the oval window as the city shrank beneath the clouds. Somewhere below, my old life was disappearing at 500 miles per hour. Across the aisle sat a man in a navy suit who hadn't looked up from his laptop since boarding. He typed with mechanical precision, his brow furrowed like he was rewriting the fate of the world. I envied him, not for his focus, but for having something that still held his attention so completely. The captain announced our descent just as the Atlantic shimmered into view. Lisbon looked like a painting. Terracotta rooftops, winding alleys, and golden light spilling across the hills like liquid honey. It was my first time here, but something about it felt familiar. Like maybe I belonged here more than I ever had back home. I collected my bag, declined the taxi, and decided to walk. I didn't have a plan. I had a name. Casa do Mar, a guest house I'd found online 2 nights ago after too many glasses of wine, and an argument that left both of us staring at opposite walls. Lucas had barely looked up when I said I needed space. "Take all the time you want," he'd muttered. So I did. The guest house was tucked into a cobbled street not far from Alfama. An older woman with silver hair and olive skin opened the door. Her eyes crinkled kindly when she saw me. "You must be Maya," she said. "We've been expecting you." "We?" I glanced inside, where the hallway stretched into warm, sunlit silence. Old floorboards creaked under my boots as I followed her in. "My name is Anna," she said, leading me to a room on the second floor. "If you need anything, just call for me." The room smelled of lavender and old wood. A lace curtain fluttered in the breeze. Outside, I could see the rooftops sloping toward the river, glinting in the late afternoon light. I unpacked slowly, not because I had much, but because it felt symbolic, like laying down roots, even if only for a while. That evening, I wandered into the city. Lisbon buzzed softly, not in the chaotic way of New York or London, but like a melody played in a minor key. Musicians performed in corners. The smell of grilled sardines hung in the air. Strangers smiled without agenda. It was intoxicating. I found myself in a small square near the cathedral, where a man played violin beneath a fig tree. I sat on a bench and listened until the sun dipped below the tiled roofs. And then I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the square, backlit by the last gold of day. Tall, dark hair, sharp suit. But it wasn't the look that stopped me. It was the way he looked at me. Like he knew me. Like he had been waiting. I blinked, and he turned away, disappearing down a narrow street. Weird, I thought. But maybe I was imagining things. Jet lag, maybe. Or just wishful delusion. Back in my room, I stood at the window and let the breeze brush my face. I told myself I had no expectations, that this was just a trip, a pause, a breath between chapters. But deep inside, something had started to hum, a low electric warning, or a calling. I wasn't sure which. What I did know, with a clarity I couldn't explain, was that my time in Lisbon would not be quiet. Something was waiting for me here, and it had teeth. Lisbon had a way of pulling you in. Narrow streets curled like secrets. Buildings leaned in close like they were whispering things you weren't meant to hear. The city felt alive, not chaotic, but purposeful, like every corner held a memory. I woke to the sound of church bells and sunlight slicing through the lace curtain. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. The flight, the guest house, the stranger in the square. After a quick shower and a strong espresso from the little cafe across the street, I started walking. No map, no plan, just instinct. I followed the smell of bread and the sound of streetcars, letting the rhythm of the city lead me. A woman sold fresh pastéis de nata from a cart. A boy chased pigeons across a plaza. Everything felt like it had been painted with warmth. I turned a corner into a quieter street and stopped in front of a small antique shop with a crooked wooden sign. Memorias. Something about it pulled me in. Dust floated in golden rays from the window. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and rosewater. Bom dia, the shopkeeper said with a gentle nod. She looked to be in her 60s, with gray curls and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I wandered between shelves of faded postcards, delicate ceramics, and brass keys with no locks. Then I saw it. A black and white photo, tucked behind a cracked glass frame. A woman stood on a balcony in Lisbon, her face half in shadow, her hair caught in the wind. There was something haunting about her, familiar, like she was on the verge of saying something important. "You like it?" the woman asked. "Who is she?" "No one knows. It was left in a box of old estate items. But people always stop at that one." "I'll take it," I said, surprising myself. She wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with string. Back on the street, I walked with the photo pressed to my chest. A storm was building behind the sun. I could feel it, a shift in the air, the way a violin string tightens before it snaps. I wandered into a quieter part of town, away from the tourist flow. The buildings were older here, chipped and mossy, their beauty a little more worn. I turned down a narrow alley to cut through toward the river. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, too steady to be casual, close behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. No one. I kept walking, faster now. A second set of footsteps joined the first, echoing mine, deliberate. I stopped. They stopped. My heart kicked into gear. I turned sharply and faced the empty alley. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice firmer than I felt. Silence. And then a figure stepped into view. Not the man from the square, someone else. Tall, tan coat, aviator sunglasses, hands in pockets, relaxed but wrong. "Office lost?" he asked, his accent clipped. "No. You sure?" "You look curious." I didn't respond. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Nice day for a walk," he added, stepping closer. I took a step back. Then a voice, sharp, familiar, called from the street behind me. "Maya!" I turned. The man from the square was there, striding toward me. This time I saw him clearly. Dark hair, tailored charcoal jacket, no tie, eyes like obsidian. "Come on," he said, reaching me without hesitation. "We're late." I blinked. He slipped his hand around my arm like we knew each other, and leaned in. "Trust me, just go with it." I nodded instinctively. He led me out of the alley, away from the man in the tan coat who didn't follow. When we were 2 blocks away, he let go. "Who was that?" I asked. "I was hoping you could tell me," he said, watching me carefully. "You followed me?" "Number, I was looking for you." I took a step back. "Why?" "Because I know your father." The words hit me like a slap. "My father's dead." He looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "Is he?" I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "Who are you?" I demanded. "My name is Gabrielle. I work with people who uncover things." "Uncover what?" "Truth, lies, buried things." I shook my head. "You're insane." He didn't flinch. "You came to Lisbon for a reason, Maya. You just don't know the whole reason yet." I stared at him. "Why me?" "Because you're not who you think you are." For a second, the world tilted. My ears buzzed. My mouth went dry. He handed me a small envelope. "When you're ready." And then he walked away. I stood there, pulse racing, fingers shaking around the envelope. I should have thrown it out. I should have gone back to my room and booked a flight home. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a photograph of my mother, pregnant, standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. And next to her, a man. Not Lucas, not anyone I knew. But the caption on the back said, Lisbon, 1990, J. West and R. De Silva, my mother, and someone named De Silva. My head spun. Who was R. De Silva? Why had Gabriel said my father might not be dead? And why did it feel like my entire life had just cracked open at the seams? I couldn't sleep that night. The photograph lay on the bedside table, just out of reach, like a fuse waiting for a match. I kept looking at the man's face next to my mother, searching for something familiar in the jawline, the tilt of his head, the way his hand rested lightly on her back. It wasn't Lucas Bennett, not the man I had always called Dad. And the house behind them? A pale yellow building with green shutters and a curved iron balcony, a date engraved on the arch, 1874. Somewhere in Lisbon. I stared at the photo until dawn. By 7 a.m., I was on the street, coffee in one hand, the photograph in the other. My plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Find the house. Ask questions, maybe get answers. I walked through neighborhoods I didn't know, letting instinct and architecture guide me. Bairro Alto, Grassa, Principe Real. I asked a florist, a baker, an old woman feeding pigeons. Most shook their heads, some offered suggestions. Finally, a cab driver recognized the facade. Campo de Ourique, he said. It's an old district. Quiet. Beautiful. I showed him the picture. He nodded slowly. Rua das Amoreiras, number 46, I think. My pulse picked up. Can you take me there? Claro. The drive took 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour. When we pulled up, I knew it instantly. Same shutters, same balcony, same worn beauty. It hadn't changed much in 30 years. Just a little older, like me. I climbed the front steps, hesitating only briefly before pressing the buzzer. A crackly voice came through. Sim? I'm looking for someone who might have lived here. In the 90s. Da Silva? Silence. Then, come in. The door buzzed open. The hallway was cool and dark, lined with faded tile. A woman appeared at the top of the stairs. Mid-60s, silver hair, navy blouse, strong posture. You said Da Silva? She asked. Yes, my name is Maya Bennett. My mother was... I think she may have known someone who lived here. She studied me. Come. We walked into a small sitting room filled with books and the smell of citrus. She gestured to a seat and sat across from me. I'm Beatrice, my brother. Rui de Silva lived here. He passed away in 2003. Oh. I swallowed. I'm sorry. She nodded, her eyes on mine. You said your mother knew him? I handed her the photo. She took it carefully. Her eyes widened slightly. I remember this day, she whispered. Your mother, Julia? I nodded slowly. Yes. Beatrice looked up. She was lovely, quiet but warm. Rui was very taken with her. My voice trembled. Were they? She didn't make me finish. Yes, she said gently. They were in love. The room tilted. But she never told me. She never said anything about... Did she ever say why she left? I shook my head. Beatrice sighed. It wasn't simple. Rui wanted her to stay, but she left suddenly. Said it wasn't safe, that someone had found out. I frowned. Found out what? She never said. Beatrice stood and walked to a shelf. She pulled down a small box and opened it. Inside, letters, all addressed to Julia Hart, my mother's maiden name, dozens of them. She handed me one. I unfolded it carefully. Querida Julia, I think of you every morning I wake alone. The house echoes without your laugh. I don't blame you for leaving. I only wish you had told me why. Tears blurred the ink. My mother had hidden this part of her life from me, from everyone. Beatrice touched my arm. "I think you should have these." I nodded, overwhelmed. Outside, the city felt different, louder, brighter, like I was seeing it through new eyes. My mother had loved here, lived here, and left it all behind. That evening, I sat on my balcony, the letters spread across the table, the photo in the center. I reread them one by one. They painted a picture I'd never seen, of a woman torn between love and fear, running from something, or someone she couldn't name. Then I remembered Gabrielle. I pulled out the card he'd left me. Gabriel Cruz, investigative consultant and a number. I hesitated. Then I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Maya, you were right," I said quietly, "about everything. Where are you?" I gave him the address. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived, I handed him the photograph. "She was here," I said, "with someone named Rui da Silva. He might have been my real father. He studied the image. We'll run the name. If he's connected to any old files, I'll find them." I hesitated. "There's more." I handed him the box of letters. He flipped through them quickly, then paused at one. "This one's dated 1991. "So?" He pointed at a symbol drawn on the corner of the page, a triangle inside a circle. "I've seen this before. It's not just a doodle." "What is it?" He looked at me, face unreadable. "It's the mark of a covert banking network, one that hides assets for powerful people, politicians, arms dealers." My blood ran cold. "Are you saying my mother was involved?" "I'm saying she was close to someone who was. Maybe too close." I stared at the photo. "What if that's why she left?" I asked. Gabriel nodded. "It's a possibility. And if that's true, Maya, someone might not want you digging." The wind shifted. A car backfired down the street. I suddenly felt very exposed. "What do I do?" He looked at me for a long time. "Now? You decide if you want to keep going." I already knew the answer. Gabriel stayed just long enough to make sure I locked the balcony door and closed the shutters. Before he left, he handed me a burner phone. "Only use this to call me. Don't text, don't email, just voice." I nodded, numb and alert at the same time, like my nervous system had decided to operate in overdrive. The air outside was still warm, but it felt colder now. The city no longer looked like a postcard. It looked like a trap. When I woke the next morning, I was exhausted. Dreams had looped all night. My mother running, a man I couldn't see, a house crumbling into the sea. But I didn't have the luxury of sleep anymore. Gabriel had promised to run checks on Rui da Silva, and I had my own mission. Find the name behind that symbol. Triangle in a circle. I started with the letters again. Most were filled with longing, sorrow, and the raw ache of someone abandoned. But one stood out. It was shorter than the others, almost clipped. Less romantic, more urgent. "Julia, if anyone ever comes asking, you don't know the name Lazarus. Destroy this." But she hadn't destroyed it. And now, it was in my hands. I searched the name online, pairing it with phrases like Lisbon, triangle symbol, and covert banking. Nothing obvious. But then I dug deeper. Not just Google Deep. DuckDuckGo. Obscure financial blogs. A Reddit thread in a conspiracy forum. One user mentioned Project Lazarus, rumored to be a code name for a financial laundering ring that operated through shell corporations in Europe during the 80s and 90s, tied to powerful people, and apparently to a handful of disappearances. I scrolled further and stopped cold when I saw it. 1991, Rui da Silva, Lisbon, vanished after alleged affair with whistleblower. It wasn't a death report. No body. No follow-up. He'd just disappeared. A knot formed in my stomach. Was that why my mother left? not because she chose to, but because she had to. I needed more. That afternoon, I called Beatrice. She answered on the second ring. Maya? I need to ask something. Did your brother have enemies? She hesitated. Could make someone vanish. A long silence followed. Finally, he was always private. But yes, there were men who came around. Sharp suits, cold eyes. Rui would argue with them outside. Once I saw one grab his arm. Rui told me not to worry. But after that, he stopped bringing Julia around. I closed my eyes. Did she know? I think she knew too much. I felt that same chill again, like someone was watching me from behind my shoulder. Beatrice continued. He gave her something once. A folder. I asked what it was, and he said, insurance. She hid it in the house. Then she was gone. A folder. Insurance. If it still existed, I had to find it. That night, I called Gabriel. He listened without interruption as I explained what I'd found. Then he said, we need to find that house. The one your mother lived in here. The one she might have hidden something in. I frowned. But she wasn't here long. She must have rented a place. Maybe under a fake name. I'll cross-reference rental records with Julia Hart and similar names. Should I ask Beatrice? Number if it's dangerous, we don't pull her in more than she already is. I sat back in my chair, heart racing. This was more than a family mystery now. This was survival. Later that evening, I took the photograph out again, the one of my mother and Rui. I scanned every corner. Then I noticed something new. In the lower right corner, barely visible in the sunlight, a reflection in the window behind them. A man. Not Rui. Not Lucas Bennett. Someone else. Standing in the shadow, half turned, almost like he was watching them. I sent the image to Gabriel. 5 minutes later, he called. You just opened a door. What do you mean? I enhanced the reflection. It matches an old surveillance photo I've seen before. The man's name is Eduardo Rivas. He used to work for a Portuguese intelligence agency. Disappeared in 1995. And what was he doing in the photo? Gabriel paused, watching. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. He was monitoring them? Or protecting them, or setting them up. We don't know yet. I stood up, pacing the small room. What now? Gabriel's voice was low. We dig, quietly, and you stay put. No more walking around with that photo in your hand. But what if... No, Maya, this isn't just your story anymore. This is something people have tried very hard to keep buried. If Rui's disappearance is tied to Project Lazarus, and your mother took evidence... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I was no longer just a daughter with questions. I was a threat, and threats get silenced. I stepped back from the glass, heart pounding. Gabriel, I'm here. If they took Rui, what if they're still watching me? A pause. Then, they might be. Silence. The next morning, Gabriel called at sunrise. I found it. I was still in bed, half wrapped in the linen sheets of my tiny rental, my mind foggy from restless sleep. I sat up fast. The house, he confirmed, rented under the name Julia Varela. It's on Rua das Flores. Lease records stop in 1991. It hasn't been listed since. My heart started racing. What's there now? Still a house. Still locked. No list my father hadn't aged the way I expected. He looked smaller somehow, standing in the entryway of his stone cottage just outside Sintra, surrounded by fog and pine trees that whispered like ghosts. His once thick hair was thinning, and the sharp jawline I remembered from old family photos was now softer, weathered. Still, when he saw me, his face stiffened. Maya, he said. Not sweetheart, not my girl, just Maya. I held the backpack tighter. Can we talk? He hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. The inside was cold and sparse. A fire was dying in the hearth, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been moved in years. The same wooden clock ticked on the mantel, the same tenant since. Looks like it fell off the grid completely, but I think you should see it. I got dressed in silence. Jeans, sneakers, hair pulled into a tight knot. I didn't want to stand out. Rua das Flores was one of those streets the tourists didn't find, tucked behind a crumbling stone wall, with vines curling over rusting gates. We met in front of number 17, a two-story townhouse, pale yellow once, now faded to the color of old parchment. Gabriel looked at me. You ready? No. We went in anyway. The front door was swollen from rain and time, and Gabriel had to shoulder it open. Inside, it smelled like dust and rot, but under that, lavender, like someone had tried to make it feel like home. My mother. The furniture was still there, old but elegant, a carved wooden dresser, a velvet chair with claw feet, and in the corner, a bookshelf filled with yellowing paperbacks, their spines bowed like aging soldiers. Check upstairs, Gabriel said. I'll take the kitchen. I climbed slowly. The stairs creaked like they remembered me. There were 2 bedrooms. One was almost empty, just a metal frame bed and cracked mirror. The other felt lived in. On the windowsill, a small porcelain fox sat facing out, its paint chipped but bright. I touched it, and something fluttered behind it, a folded scrap of paper. I opened it. It wasn't a letter, it was a map, just a rough sketch of the house's layout. But someone had circled a point in red, the fireplace downstairs. I ran. Gabriel was already poking at the hearth with a crowbar when I burst in. Stop, here, I said, pointing. It's under there. We pried up the stone. Beneath it was a small metal box, wrapped in plastic. Gabriel opened it carefully. Inside, a stack of papers, microfilm, old photographs, a cassette tape. My mother's handwriting was on the label. If anything happens to me, give this to the press. I stared at it. It's real. Gabriel nodded slowly. You just found the ghost of a secret war. Suddenly there was a noise. Outside. We froze. A car. Gabriel motioned for silence. He peeked through the curtains. 2 men. Unmarked sedan. Not police. My stomach dropped. They followed us? Maybe, or maybe they've been waiting. He stuffed the box into his backpack. Back door, now. We ran through the back, out into an alley. Gabriel knew the turns like he'd mapped them, and within minutes we were blocks away, walking fast but calm. When we finally stopped, hidden behind a row of trash bins behind a market, I collapsed onto a crate. Gabriel handed me a water bottle. You okay? I nodded. They were watching the house? I think they've been watching it for years. We just woke something up. I looked at the backpack. What happens if we go public with this? He hesitated.